Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about Saturn being in all 12 of the houses in your natal chart. So we're going to talk about what Saturn really is, because so many people fear Saturn. Saturn is the difficult, malefic, first-rate malefic that will definitely cause some obstacles in your life. But don't forget, Saturn is definitely the planet that gives us our just rewards. What does that mean? What you put into things, you're going to get out. And when you have a great Saturn, the second part of your life is always the best. When you have a really strong Saturn, say it's in an angle, houses 1, 4, 7, or 10, and it's in its sign of rulership, which is in Capricorn or Aquarius, or if it's in its sign of exaltation, which is Libra. So if your Saturn's in any of those signs, those three signs, and in houses 1, 4, 7, or 10, you actually have what's called a Sasha Yoga. And that's one of the Mahapurusha yogas of Vedic astrology. Mahapurusha yoga simply means the yoga of great men. And of course, what about the women, huh? It's a very patriarchal society, but still of humanity, let's put it that way. So with that means that everything that Saturn's about is who you are, which is all powerful. Saturn is the planet I would want in good dignity over any other planet, because then it's not there to harm you. But it will always cause obstacles and delays and setbacks and problems at times. It just does. It teaches us to slow down. And Saturn gives maturity, where people really grow to understand something, and wisdom more than anything. Remember, Saturn is wisdom. And with that, you'll find that as we grow and we mature, we become wiser. That's Saturn. Saturn actually can represent old age. It can deal with endings, and it does deal with death. It does. You know, its transit sometimes can bring death to people, or death to things, or endings, or setbacks, delays, problems. But on top of that, it gives us are just rewards. And the rewards that you get with Saturn are far greater than anything else, because it's something that you've achieved and you've worked for. Saturn gives us discipline. It gives us focus. It gives us structure in our life, because without Saturn, nothing could come together, or nothing could even get done. So we need the work ethic and the responsibility and the discipline that Saturn gives. And that's the power of Saturn. So Saturn must be on our side, or you're never going to achieve the goals and ambitions and the drives that you set out to do, unless you're using Saturn properly. So before I go through Saturn being in all 12 of the houses, I just want to remind everyone that this January, I am starting a new class of semester 1, January 2021. Don't miss it. This is going to be a new beginning. The University of Vedic Astrology is an all-online university to learn Vedic astrology, and we have some of the most dynamic, incredible group of astrologers in this group. So I hope you'll think to join us this January. Now, also I want to throw in my new jewelry line that you'll see on my website, galacticcenter.org, and these beautiful malas that you can imprint with your prayer work, and earrings. Check it out, galacticcenter.org. One more thing before we go into the houses. This is the book that I recommend about the houses. It's Astrology, the Divine Order of the Universe. Talks about the planets in all the houses, and also the transits through all the houses. And don't forget my textbook, which is Eastern astrology for Western minds, for those of you that want to take all of this a step further. So let's talk about Saturn being in the first house. The first house is you. And when you have Saturn in the first house, this means you have a great deal of discipline. And you're always wanting to take care of others. You feel like it's your responsibility to care for other people. Even as a child, you somehow feel responsible to take care of everyone, even your parents. You are just this focused, responsible soul. But at the same time, with Saturn being in the first house, you can be a little bit too serious. Saturn does deal with seriousness. And you got to lighten up sometime, because you know, sometimes you just get over the top worrying about everything and everyone, with Saturn being in the first house. And even your entrance into the world could have been delayed somehow. Maybe you were born late, but many times there's something difficult, especially if Saturn is right on the ascendant, something difficult that surrounded your birth. Possibly your parents were struggling, or there was something going on at the time that your parents were in a difficult place, with Saturn directly on the ascendant. So Saturn being in the second house. The second house is the house that deals with our early childhood experiences. Therefore, there could have been some difficulty with early childhood experiences. And Saturn also being in the second house can deal with a lack of not eating enough, or just there's something about digestion with the food. And probably with Saturn in the second house, you feel like when you were a child that what you had to say wasn't important, or you just didn't talk a lot because maybe you were told to be quiet. And therefore, many people that have Saturn in the second house feel like what they have to say, they just can't get it out. And they feel like their sense of self has been destroyed because maybe they've been shushed many times, be quiet, don't make noise, be seen, not heard. All of those things affected the sense of yourself and speaking, you know, having people hear you. You're blocked in that area, and that's what needs to be uncovered and healed when Saturn's in the second house. It can sometimes be a deterrent and a blockage to you being successful and making money. So Saturn being in the third house does deal with siblings. Either it means you're the youngest one, because it does deal with the youngest sibling, because it means no one's beneath you in the birth order. And if you're not the youngest one, then there's some kind of difficulty with a sibling or the youngest one. There could even be some disabilities or problems for the youngest sibling. And Saturn in the third house, maybe you had problems learning in school. It was more difficult for you initially at first to learn in school. And maybe it's because of conditions around the home. You had so many difficulties that got in the way of learning and education early on. So Saturn in the third house can also affect your hearing. Maybe you had earaches, or you had problems with hearing or your ears when you were younger. And Saturn in the third house, though, can make you very disciplined and focused, especially when it comes to writing and learning. Maybe you did extremely well in school, but you had to try really hard. That's how I see Saturn in the third house. Saturn being in the third house will also, well, you know, you just have this focus and discipline around learning, and you push yourself to get it done. Saturn in the fourth house, well, there'll be some kind of issue or problem possibly dealing with your mother. And your mother may be very cold, detached, just not one of those warm, loving, affectionate mothers. Because Saturn is very stern, it can be very detached, and it can be a disciplinarian. So that could be what you experienced around the home with your mother. When it comes to property or real estate, it seems like you're always having to move or go somewhere else. Minute you move into a house, something comes up. It seems like you're always going and moving. With Saturn in the third house, or sometimes it can mean you just stay in the same place forever. Saturn can deal with longevity. That's another thing that Saturn rules, longevity, okay? So Saturn being in the fifth house deals with children. It deals with, and this can delay having children, or either there's something difficult around having children, even just maybe whether or not you can have them. But usually with Saturn in the fifth house, you will have fantastic, beautiful children that are very disciplined and focused. And depending on the sign, if let's say it's exalted, there can be very successful children. And actually I have exalted Saturn in the fifth. So this deals with 3 children. I actually have 3 planets in my fifth house, 3 children that are very successful. And definitely one of them are going to be that Saturn, one of my 3 boys. So another thing is Saturn in the fifth house will give the focus to the mind and can also deal with writing, the ability to write books. Don't forget the fifth house is the house of authorship. And the fifth house is also the house of investments. Maybe you should be careful with that with Saturn there. Of course, depending on the sign, makes it different. But Saturn in the fifth house gives a great deal of intelligence as well, because the fifth house is intelligence. So Saturn being in the sixth house, this can deal with your health and healing. This can mean that you have a very strong immune system. And the way that the sixth house works is when you put malefic planets in the sixth house, it can mean that it strengthens the immune system. So because it's an upachaya house, meaning over time things improve and get better, when one malefic's there, it helps the constitution and health. But more than one can actually break it down and destroy health. But Saturn in the sixth house will also make someone ultra mega responsible in the workplace, would never dream of being late to work or not give 110% in the job that they do in every day. And this can also direct them into a field of health and healing. So Saturn being in the seventh house, this can mean a long-term marriage. Remember, Saturn actually gets Digbala in the seventh house, meaning directional strength. It's extremely strong in the seventh house. Now, it doesn't make for the easiest situation all the time in marriage and relationships. It just doesn't. But it will mean that when you're in a relationship, you want it to last forever. And not only do you want it to last forever, when maybe the marriage is kaput or the relationship is long due over, you will stay in it longer than you should, because you're always trying to make things work. You want to make sure it's going to work, even though you look back and you go, why didn't I get out of that relationship a long time ago? Saturn goes for the duration. Just remember that. So Saturn being in the eighth house, this can be someone that really wants to take things to the core, the deepest level imaginable. It can sometimes block intuition and psychic ability sometimes, but it is about somebody that wants to understand the deeper aspects of life and find answers, find the truth. And this is through work, hard work, and metaphysics. This would be Saturn being in the eighth house. And many times it can deal with some instances of disgrace, humiliation early on in life, but it also means it breeds humility, which makes for a much better life later. And one more thing, Saturn in the eighth house usually means you live a long time. Saturn in the third house can mean you live a long time. These are the 2 houses of longevity, houses 3 and 8. Saturn being in the 9th house, there's probably a block with the father, depending on what sign it is. There's just like there's some kind of, the father just is a disciplinarian. He can be very stern. He can be very rule conscious and possibly just really structured in so many ways and demands the same of you. Higher school education, college, it may be a little difficult. There may be some delays where you start college, start school, and you have to stop, but you go back. That's Saturn will cause delays or setbacks. And sometimes it will cause intermittent learning where things end, but you pick it up later. So Saturn being in the 10th house, you are very focused and disciplined in your work and your career, but you have very difficult bosses. Many times Saturn in the 10th house can mean you work for the government or a big organization similar to like the government. You work for others. Saturn in the 10th house will definitely give you the focus, the discipline, and the drive to be successful. Now, Saturn in the 11th house will represent, maybe you're the oldest one because there's no one above you in the birth order, but if not, then there'll be a big separation between your oldest sibling. Maybe it's by age, maybe it's by distance, but there's not a closeness with the eldest sibling. And Saturn being in the 11th house means you don't really want a lot of friends because you really need to trust people. And with Saturn in the 11th house, the only friends that you really trust are the ones you've known a really long time, old friends. And this is what's important to you, to have trustworthy friends that don't waste your time or drain your energy. And you don't want to be bothered by many acquaintances. You just want a few very close, old, dear friends. That's the kind of friends that you surround yourself with. So if Saturn is in your 12th house, this is the house that deals with sleep. Saturn is a malefic. It can cause you to not sleep long enough, to have issues with sleep, but it also deals with what? Hidden enemies. So Saturn there is like you have these people that just, are bothered around the workplace with you or make your work more difficult. And they do it in a way that is undermining and not out in the open. So that's Saturn in the 12th house. Plus, when Saturn's in the 12th house, sometimes you can't let go of things from the past. And this is very important because this is a core issue that you have to learn to do. You got to let go of things from the past that don't benefit you, because this is going to bring you down and cause you blockages to moving forward in the many aspects of your life. And probably you don't particularly like so much to be in faraway places because you feel more comfortable at home. So with that, I've covered Saturn if it's placed in any of your 12 houses. So I want to close with that, but don't forget, if you want to take this to the next level, check out my university, University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.